We grow up surrounded by ready-made answers. Be polite. Work hard. Succeed. Fit in. But almost no one teaches us to ask the one question that truly matters. Who am I when no one's watching? Maybe you, like millions of others, are living a life that was programmed for you, following rules, chasing goals, wearing a mask you call me. But beneath that mask, who are you really? Carl Jung called this mask the persona, the socially accepted version of yourself you've been perfecting for years. And while you've tried so hard to be good, successful, likable, another part of you has been whispering from the shadows. This is your shadow, the part you were told to hide, the raw, honest side of you that's been buried under expectations. In this video, we'll take a deep dive into the psychological trap you may be living in without even knowing it. We'll explore how your persona was formed, how your shadow was exiled, and how to finally begin the process of reclaiming your true self. But before we begin, ask yourself one thing. Are you truly ready to meet the real you? The mask you didn't know you were wearing. Jim had everything. A respected career, a loving family, a beautiful home. On the surface, he was the image of success. Colleagues admired him, his children adored him, and strangers would have gladly traded lives with him. But every morning, as he adjusted his tie in the mirror, a quiet voice inside whispered something that unsettled him. This isn't you. He ignored it, of course. After all, he had worked hard for this life, chose it with intention, didn't he? But that voice never left. It followed him into board meetings, echoed through family dinners, crept into his thoughts just before sleep. Then one day, it broke through. Jim was sitting at the head of a long glass table during yet another corporate meeting. A joke was told. Laughter filled the room. Jim laughed too. But mid-laugh, something inside him cracked. Why am I laughing? Do I even think it's funny? And that's when it hit him. He wasn't laughing because he wanted to. He was laughing because it was expected. In that instant, Jim saw it all. The polished life, the charming mannerisms, the agreeable smiles, they weren't him. They were a performance. A role he'd played so well, he had forgotten it was an act. He rushed to the bathroom, stared at his own face in the mirror, and felt like he was looking at a stranger. This is what Carl Jung called the persona, the mask we construct, piece by piece, to survive in a world that demands conformity. As children, we learn which parts of us earn approval and which parts earn rejection. Speak too loud? Be quiet. Cry too much? Toughen up. Share a strange idea? Play it safe. So we adapt. We become what others want us to be. And slowly, without even realizing it, we lose sight of who we were before the world told us who to be. But here's the haunting truth. The longer we wear the mask, the harder it is to take off. The question is how much of your identity is truly yours and how much was simply borrowed to survive. When fitting in becomes forgetting, the persona begins as a shield. In childhood, it protects us. It helps us navigate the expectations of parents, teachers, and peers. We quickly learn that being too loud, too emotional, too curious, or too different can lead to ridicule or rejection. So we begin editing ourselves. We smile when we're sad. We nod when we disagree. We hold back thoughts, feelings, instincts, not because we're dishonest, but because we're afraid of not being accepted. And little by little, this curated version of us becomes the only version we present to the world. Society rewards the well-behaved, the agreeable, the polished. We get praise, attention, promotions. We make friends, avoid conflict, and blend in. But there's a cost. A subtle erosion of authenticity, a quiet death of the self. Because the more we perform, the more we forget we're performing. And what starts as a mask becomes a second skin. Carl Jung warned that while the persona serves a necessary function, the danger lies in identifying with it completely. When we believe the mask is all we are, we exile the deeper truths inside us, the fears, the desires, the contradictions we were told not to feel. These don't disappear. They retreat. They go underground. Jung called this buried part of us the shadow, and ignoring it doesn't make it vanish. In fact, the more we deny its presence, the more control it gains over our thoughts, emotions, and behaviors. Have you ever laughed at a joke that wasn't funny just to seem pleasant? Ever hidden your real opinion in a conversation to keep the peace? Ever said yes when your entire body wanted to say no? These aren't just social compromises. They're signals moments where your true self hesitated, but your persona took over. Most people spend years, even decades, making these micro-compromises until one day. Like Jim, they wake up wondering why their life feels like someone else's. It's not because they're weak or lost, it's because they've been expertly trained to be acceptable. But being acceptable isn't the same as being real. And here's the terrifying truth: the longer you live through your persona, the more foreign your true self becomes. Until eventually, you look in the mirror and realize you don't even know who you are anymore. So ask yourself, are you living a life that's true or one that simply works? The shadow you pretend doesn't exist. Deep within the psyche, behind every polite smile, every socially approved gesture, and every carefully measured response, there lives a force most people spend their entire lives avoiding. Jung called it the shadow, the part of ourselves we've disowned, the qualities we were taught to reject, fear, or hide. It holds the anger we were told not to show, the ambition we were told was selfish, the sadness we were told to swallow. But the shadow is not evil. It is not a villain. It is simply honest. And that's what makes it terrifying. Because it reminds us of everything we are, but we're never allowed to be. Think about it. Why do some insults sting more than others? If someone calls you something that has no root in your self-image, it bounces off. But when the words hit a nerve, lazy, weak, selfish, you react. Not because they're true, but because some part of you fears they might be. That discomfort, that emotional charge, that's your shadow responding. It's the voice inside that's been silenced for so long, it has to scream just to be heard. The shadow doesn't just live in our reactions, it shows up in our relationships, our desires, our habits. Have you ever found yourself strangely irritated by someone for no logical reason? Perhaps you despise people who brag, but deep down, you wish you could speak with that same confidence. Or maybe you mock emotional people because part of you longs to cry but doesn't know how anymore. The traits that provoke you in others often point directly to what you've repressed in yourself. Jung called this projection. When we reject qualities in ourselves, we begin to see them, often exaggerated, in the people around us. And here's the danger: when we deny the shadow, we don't get rid of it. We give it power. It slips into our actions without permission. It leaks out in sarcasm, in passive aggression, in sudden outbursts of anger or sadness we can't explain. We say things we regret. We sabotage things we care about. We act in ways that seem foreign even to ourselves. Most people believe they are simply being emotional or stressed, but beneath the surface, it's often the shadow fighting to be seen. You can't outrun it. You can't bury it forever. And the more you try to be good, perfect, pleasing, the louder it knocks. The question is, are you ready to stop pretending and start listening? Because what you fear the most about your shadow might just be the part of you that holds the key to your freedom. The silent war within. Most people live their entire lives unaware that they are at war with themselves. On the outside, they appear composed, generous, thoughtful, well-liked by peers, praised by family, successful by all common standards. But inside, something else is happening. A quiet tension. A split. On one side, the persona well-mannered, responsible, selfless. On the other, the shadow angry, ambitious, emotional, raw. And the deeper this divide grows, the more exhausting it becomes to keep up the performance. You've probably felt it. That moment when you smile through gritted teeth, when someone crosses a line, and instead of speaking up, you swallow it. When you say yes, even though everything in you screams no. These aren't just habits. They're symptoms. Every time you silence your truth to protect the persona, you feed the shadow. And the shadow doesn't forget. It waits. It waits until you're tired, until your defenses drop, until one small thing, a snide comment, a rejection, a stressor breaks the dam. And suddenly, you say something cruel. You lash out. You feel shame or guilt or confusion. You ask yourself, why did I react like that? That's not me. But maybe it is. Maybe it's the part of you you've been running from. The truth is, you don't become whole by being only light. You become whole by owning your darkness too. This war didn't begin yesterday. It began the moment someone told you that certain parts of you weren't acceptable, that your tears were weakness, that your anger was dangerous, that your desire to be seen, heard, or loved was too much. So you locked those parts away. But buried emotions don't die. They distort. And eventually, they manifest not as who you truly are, but as the version of you that acts out when you're overwhelmed, broken, or alone. Jung understood this better than anyone. He saw that when the shadow is ignored, it doesn't disappear, it festers. And over time, it erupts in addiction, anxiety, depression, broken relationships, or the haunting sense that something is missing. So many people spend years trying to fix themselves without realizing the problem isn't who they are. It's that they've denied half of who they are. You can't become free by fighting yourself. You become free by understanding yourself. So here's the question: what if the parts of you you've spent your whole life hiding are the parts you most need to heal? What you reject becomes what controls you. Every trait you suppress, every impulse you deny, every feeling you push away, none of it disappears. It waits. In the background of your life, your shadow watches silently, collecting every unspoken resentment, every swallowed truth, every moment you betrayed yourself to be accepted. And the more you reject it, the more power it gains. It doesn't ask for permission. It doesn't wait for a convenient time. It shows up in your life unannounced in ways that confuse you, hurt others, and sabotage the very things you care about. This is why the people who seem the most together on the surface often struggle the most internally. When someone builds a life on perfectionism, always agreeable, always composed, always admired, they often do so by burying their chaos, their cravings, their contradictions. But a mask worn too long begins to fuse to the skin, and eventually, what once protected you becomes the prison that isolates you. Jung warned that unacknowledged shadows become dangerous, not because they are inherently evil, but because they are denied. A repressed emotion doesn't disappear, it returns as illness. A repressed desire doesn't vanish, it turns into compulsion. A repressed fear becomes control. And most tragically, a repressed identity, when left unclaimed, leaves you feeling like a stranger in your own life. Think about the patterns that keep repeating. The relationships that always implode. The goals that slip away right when you get close. The opportunities you unconsciously sabotage. These aren't accidents. They are echoes. Echoes of the shadow, trying to get your attention in the only way it knows how, by disrupting the illusion you call your life. You may think you're being logical, rational, responsible. But behind that logic may be fear. Behind that responsibility may be shame. Behind that reasonableness may be rage. And here's the hardest truth of all: you can't selectively numb parts of yourself. If you suppress pain, you suppress joy. If you avoid your anger, you dull your passion. If you reject your vulnerability, you shut out intimacy. Your wholeness lives not in being perfect, but in being complete. And completeness requires owning everything, especially the parts you were taught to reject. So ask yourself, what are you most afraid of admitting about yourself? Because what you hide holds the key to what you seek. The root of your self-sabotage. You're not broken. You're not weak. And you're not lazy. But if you've ever found yourself ruining a good thing, walking away from love, procrastinating on your dreams, pushing people away just when they get close, you've likely been living under the influence of your shadow. Not consciously, not deliberately, but through patterns, through impulses, through fear disguised as logic. You may think you're protecting yourself, but in reality, you're protecting the very version of yourself that's keeping you stuck. Carl Jung understood that self-sabotage is rarely irrational. It's strategic. Somewhere deep inside, you've learned that certain outcomes are dangerous. That success might bring judgment. That love might lead to abandonment. That vulnerability might open the door to shame. So instead of reaching forward, you pull back. Instead of risking joy, you rehearse pain. And then you call it fate, or bad luck, or not being good enough. But the truth is, it's your own shadow, still holding the pen to your story. This is the paradox. The parts of ourselves we most suppress are often the parts most desperate to be expressed. That anger you're ashamed of, it might be the fuel you need to set a boundary. That jealousy you hide, it could be showing you what you truly desire. That deep sadness you numb, it's the mourning of a self you've never fully lived. We suppress these feelings because we were told they're wrong. But what if they're not wrong, just misunderstood? The shadow doesn't sabotage your life because it wants you to fail. It sabotages your life because it wants to be acknowledged. It wants you to stop lying to yourself, to stop pretending you're fine, to stop acting like the version of you the world accepts is the only version that matters. It's not trying to destroy you, it's trying to wake you up. But awakening isn't easy. It requires the courage to stop blaming others, to stop looking outside for validation, to look in the mirror and ask, what am I hiding from myself? And then, to stay with that discomfort long enough to hear the answer. Because healing doesn't begin with fixing. It begins with facing. And until you face your shadow, you'll keep tripping over it in the dark, wondering why your life feels like a maze you can't escape. So here's the invitation. Instead of running from your darkness, what if you turn toward it? The path to becoming whole. The shadow is not your enemy. It is your lost potential, your repressed vitality, your forgotten strength. And to reclaim it is not to become someone new, but to return to someone you were always meant to be. This is what Carl Jung called individuation, the lifelong journey of integrating the persona and the shadow, of becoming whole by uniting the conscious and unconscious parts of the self. Not perfect, not polished, but real, alive, human. Most people think transformation means self-improvement being more disciplined, more positive. But individuation is not about adding to yourself. It's about retrieving what you've abandoned. It's looking at the traits you were told were wrong, your sensitivity, your ambition, your intensity, and realizing they were never the problem. The problem was the world's inability to hold your fullness. And so, you made yourself small, palatable, acceptable. But the cost of being accepted is often the exile of the soul. Jung believed that healing begins not in the light, but in the darkness. That true strength is not the absence of fear, but the courage to meet it. The path of individuation begins the moment you stop asking, what should I be? And start asking, what have I left behind? It begins when you feel the discomfort of being out of alignment, not with society, but with yourself. And instead of numbing it, you listen. You turn toward the pain, not to suffer, but to understand it, because what we understand no longer controls us. This is not an easy road. It requires honesty, deep, radical honesty. It requires you to admit that the life you've built, the image you protect, the habits you justify, may not be aligned with your true self. It may require letting go of relationships, careers, or identities that once defined you. And that's terrifying, because becoming whole often feels like falling apart. But it's not destruction. It's deconstruction of everything that is not truly you. So many people search for purpose in careers, in achievements, in roles. But Jung teaches us your true purpose is to become yourself. Fully, unapologetically. That is your sacred task. And it begins when you stop seeking approval and start seeking integration. The question is no longer, how can I be accepted? It's how can I be whole? And to be whole, you must walk into the parts of you you were told to fear and offer them a seat at the table. How to meet your shadow. Integration begins with one quiet but radical decision to stop avoiding yourself. not in theory, not as a concept, but in practice every day, in the smallest moments. Because your shadow doesn't show up in big, dramatic ways at first. It whispers through your reactions, your discomfort, your judgments. And if you pay attention, it will show you exactly where to begin. Step 1 is observation. For the next 24 hours, become a silent observer of yourself. Watch how often you filter your words to avoid judgment. Notice when you force a laugh, hold back a truth, say yes when you mean no. These are the cracks where your persona is holding back your real voice. Don't judge what you find. Just notice. Because self-awareness is the doorway. Everything begins there. Step 2 is reflection. Jung often engaged with his shadow through a method he called active imagination, a form of inner dialogue where he would literally speak to the darker parts of his mind and ask, "What do you want from me? What are you protecting? What are you trying to teach me?" You can do the same. Sit in silence. Journal without censoring yourself. Ask your anger, your jealousy, your fear what they're trying to say. Behind every uncomfortable emotion is an unmet need or a silenced truth. Step 3 is expression. The shadow doesn't want control, it wants release. Find safe, honest ways to let it out. Turn your anger into a boundary. Turn your pain into poetry. Let your sadness paint. Let your resentment write. You don't need to act out every emotion, but you do need to give it a voice. Because what you express consciously no longer has to act out unconsciously. And finally, step 4, compassion. This is where most people stop. They notice their shadow and feel shame. But healing isn't about punishment. It's about inclusion. The traits you buried were not mistakes, they were strategies. As a child, you hid parts of yourself to feel safe. But now, you're not a child anymore. You can hold those parts with understanding. You can choose differently. You can bring them back home. Meeting your shadow doesn't mean becoming reckless or impulsive. It means becoming honest. It means living a life that doesn't just look good, but feels true. And in a world obsessed with performance, that honesty is revolutionary. So ask yourself, when was the last time I told the truth not just to others, but to myself? That answer will show you where your work begins. Your real self was never lost, only buried. Here's a truth most people never hear. You are not broken. You are buried. Under expectations, under conditioning, under years of being told who to be, how to feel, what parts of yourself are acceptable, and which must be silenced. And if you're feeling lost, empty, disconnected, it doesn't mean you're weak. It means your soul is asking to be seen again. Jung believed that within every human being, there exists a deeper, truer self, a self with a capital S. Not the self that pleases others, not the self that performs, but the one that simply is. And while the persona may be what you show the world, and the shadow may be what you hide from it, the self is what you've always been, underneath it all. The journey of individuation is not about becoming the self, it's about uncovering it. Peeling back every layer that was never really you. The opinions you inherited, the fears you absorbed, the dreams you chased that were never yours to begin with. And as you shed these layers, you may feel grief, because parts of you will die. But in that death, something is reborn. Something honest, something alive. Think of a seed buried in soil. In the darkness, unseen, it begins to crack open. Not because it's broken, but because it's becoming. That's what you are doing. Cracking open. Breaking free. Not to collapse, but to emerge. This is not the end of who you are. It's the beginning of who you've always been. And here's the most beautiful part. Your real self doesn't need to be created. It only needs to be remembered. Every instinct you've ignored, every truth you've silenced, every spark of authenticity you've buried under should and must and ought to, they're still there. Waiting. Hoping. Trusting that one day you would stop running from yourself. So stop. Right now, breathe. Close your eyes. and ask, who was I before the world told me who to be? Sit with whatever rises. That flicker of truth, that ache of recognition, that's you. And no matter how long it's been, no matter how far you've strayed, you can return. Because the path home was never outside of you. It was always waiting within. The journey begins now. You don't need to change who you are. You only need to remember who you were before the forgetting began. Beneath the masks, the roles, the fears, the adaptations, your essence remains untouched. It has been waiting patiently through every compromise, through every moment you smiled when you wanted to scream, through every time you said, "I'm fine," when you were anything but. It has never left you. It has only been waiting for your permission to return. Carl Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." And this is what individuation offers you, not a path to perfection, but a path to presence. Not to become someone better, but to become someone whole. The shadow does not exist to shame you. It exists to awaken you, to remind you of your depth, your passion, your rawness, your forgotten fire. And when you begin to walk toward it, something changes. The energy that once fueled your self-doubt now fuels your truth. The emotions you once feared become messengers. The pain you avoided becomes your greatest teacher. But this work is not instant. It is not glamorous. There are no shortcuts. Just daily honesty, daily courage, daily choices to show up not as who the world wants, but as who you are. And on some days, that will feel like freedom. On others, it may feel like loss. But every step you take away from who you're supposed to be is a step closer to who you were meant to be. So today, do just one thing. Be honest. With yourself. With someone you love. In one small moment where you'd usually hide, speak. In one place where you'd usually shrink, stand tall. That's how it begins. Not with declarations, but with decisions. Quiet ones, but powerful. The mask was never your face, and the shadow was never your enemy. They were both parts of your journey, one to survive, the other to awaken. Now the question remains, will you finally return to yourself? Your journey starts now.